and welcome to another interesting podcast episode. Today we have with us another very interesting guest, someone who has come to NMIMS earlier as well as a TEDx speaker, and we have the pleasure of having her with us again today. We have Miss Rami Desai. Hello, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for having me again. Basically, you guys bullied me into it.
So when we were thinking about how we want to talk around this, we had a lot of ideas because we've seen a lot of your episodes and you've come into news channels and all of that. But today we wanted to talk to you about your story, your life story, and how all of that has come around. I mean, at such a young age, you've incredible amount of success.
Sorry, this is why I like NMIMS. They said at such a young age. Please continue.
Yes. So yes, ma'am, like I was saying, and for women especially, you're definitely a role model, especially for all of us here. We see you, and even like when we were talking a year ago, she came to me, she's like, oh my God, I love Rami. She's so amazing. She's so great. She did this for me. She did that for me. She taught me this. And that is just aspirational, honestly. So could you like a little bit start with how your entire journey began in your childhood, maybe somewhere around that?
So I consider myself very, very lucky. And if you want me to start from my childhood, trust me, we'll be here for a couple of days. So I'm not going to do that. But having said that, I grew up in Delhi. I'm predominantly a South Delhi kid. Though my parents aren't from Delhi. I'm Gujarati, so I'm first generation, born and brought up in Delhi. Okay. And I did my school there, but then I did bits of pieces of my education in Bombay. Majority of my education in England, and that's where it was England where I learned a lot of stuff. I did the right subjects, I enjoyed what I studied, and that's what brought me to the kind of work that I do, which is fairly the majority part of my life and the most exciting part of my life.
So ma'am, could you tell us how this whole cultural exchange was like? How did that impact you in your life, or maybe how did that contribute into your work profile?
You mean going to England?
Yeah, maybe.
So when I went to England, you have to see that in the last 10 years, things have changed a lot, So maybe again, in another 10 years, you're in college right now, 10 years later, you would find that things have changed a lot because technology suddenly took over. I was possibly the first generation that really actively started using email. And you guys are the next generation. So imagine the generation after you, how advanced technology is going to become, So I think that was one of the major things that sort of I noticed of going to England, because we still hadn't gotten used to using a lot of technology in India. When I went to England, they were in second stage. They weren't also really refined about it, but they were still using it. So we were, we had to type out all our papers, we had to email them, and everybody for the first time had official email accounts, and to you all it might seem like it was really a long time ago, but trust me, 10 years, a decade, decade and a half passes so quickly. Now I feel that obviously things are very different and we're living in a different world, but at that time that was exciting for us. But also being in England was interesting because we made a lot of friends basis a lot of stuff that we did, so the clubs that we were in, the sports that we played, the time that we spent together. It wasn't that easy to make IC calls, it wasn't that easy to have mobile phones, those were still limited. Everybody had a mobile phone, but you counted how many hours you were using or minutes you were using, and therefore you spent a lot of time with each other, and that gave us an opportunity to make a lot of friends with people from different backgrounds, because you were just paying more attention, you weren't on your phone. You didn't have social media. We didn't have Facebook when I went to college, so you weren't spending a lot of time on that. You were actually making real-time friends and fighting with them and unfriending them and then making friends again. One of the funny instances was that I always thought I came from an English-speaking family. English was natural to me. I always thought I knew English. And then I go to England, and earlier on when you'd go on holidays, you always had family with you or whatever, so you wouldn't feel it, and you'd be in central London. Here, when you go to college, you're not necessarily in central London. You could be on the outskirts. The accents were so heavy. The first couple of days, I was literally I was almost in tears. I was I can't understand what anybody is saying. I thought I spoke English, And there was, they have very heavy Cockney accents. I didn't know where the cab driver was taking me. So there were all these bizarre things happening. But you tend to, get used to things when you're younger really quickly. So within, I think, maybe a week, 10 days, I had a gang. So, and we liked people and we didn't like people, and we sussed the entire, environment out in
Were
college.
you the mean girls?
Oh no, I wasn't the mean girl. I was a good girl who was actually a mean girl. So everybody thought I was the good girl. No, I was. Yeah, but I was just like boisterous. So a lot of my friends were like that. I had a Greek friend who was born and brought up in London, but she was Cypriot Greek, and she was a major Arsenal fan. And these are some of the first friends I made. I had a Pakistani friend born and brought up in England. I had Italian friends. So it was just amazing the amount of people we met. And one of the things that I consciously did, not for any other reason, is I went to a predominantly British college. So I met kids from all different backgrounds, not necessarily kids from my neighborhood back home in Delhi, which is what I saw a lot of people do. So that was a lot of fun.
So that was like a huge cultural exchange experience.
We didn't see it as youth cultural exchange, these all fancy words that you guys use now. It was just us trying to settle in and get you couldn't travel back home as often. You couldn't call back home as often. So for us, it was just trying to get a family together, and we lived in halls of residence. So our halls of residence were 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms with our own living room, kitchen. And so you wanted to make a family, right? And that's really literally what we set out to do. So, my Italian friends would make pasta, and then we'd make Indian food, and of course, Indian food won every single time.
Are you still in connect with these people?
All of them. All of them. So actually, COVID happened and we didn't get to meet each other. But last year, I had to go for work to Brussels. So I took a detour after my work, I went to Paris. My friends who were in England and Italy joined me in Paris. And we didn't have a lot of time, so we only had 2.5 days. We had the weekend because they're all working. And we had a blast. It was one of those times that you laugh till your stomach hurts.
Right.
Yeah, it was that.
Okay, that's great. But mom, help me out here a little bit. You had all of these things going on. You went to England, you had a very settled life. That is something that we can understand from this. And when you come back, one day you come back and you decide to go to Northeast and start working there. I mean, what was the thought process there?
And I've recently been to the Northeast, and it is not England. It is so. It's and that was the capital city that we went to. We were in Guwahati, and that is the capital city of Assam, one of the most developed
That's
places.
the gateway to the Northeast. So Assam was considered the gateway.
Right.
Every other state was considered even more remote because you entered via Guwahati. So that was the most advanced. But you're going now.
And even now it's underdeveloped. To me, it still felt like, semi-rural.
I went 15 years ago.
Yeah, so that's a little difficult for me to understand.
Oh my God, you and everybody around me have been asking me the same question forever. So, I always was very interested in, how do I say this without getting myself into trouble? I want to say I was always very interested in conflict. No, I was not interested in conflict. I was interested in studying conflict. But what really was interesting to me was tribal areas, was the remotest of remotest areas. So a lot of people studied, countries and more mainstream sort of ideas of insurgency or conflict. I used to always wonder, why is it that we, on one hand, think that, remoter populations, they're so fulfilled and they're so happy and they live in these wonderful surroundings, in the midst of nature. Why is it that all of, Africa, every country you can find ethnic conflict, tribal rivalries? So that really interested me. And when I went to England, I was very, very lucky to have parents who were really supportive. So they didn't push me to study anything mainstream, whatever I wanted to. So as a result, I picked up theology, I picked up anthropology, I picked up 19th century English literature as well, which I really enjoyed. But that was just because I enjoyed it. But I picked up these subjects which trained me to understand these areas better. They trained me to sort of be able to do comparative studies. And I always had this at the back of my head, that why is it that I live in Delhi and the Northeast seems so far? Like, I've never traveled there. Nobody I know has traveled there. Nobody thinks of going on holidays there. What is this ULFA? ULFA used to be the biggest thing, It was the biggest insurgent group at that time. And I was like, how is it that you have insurgency in a country? Because I live in Delhi and it's like relatively safe. There's nothing, like...
Relatively safe.
Relatively safe means apart from like the random crime that happens. But otherwise, it's, it didn't have like insurgent groups operating. So I used to wonder, how do people live? People my age live there. So of course, I didn't know how to go about it, but I always knew I wanted to be on the field. So there was even a time I thought I wanted to be in conflict areas in Africa, and then, of course, there were limitations because, you need to learn language, and then you need to be associated with a bigger organization more often than not. And in those days, like I said, we had limitations to how much web usage there was. So you couldn't find out if they're smaller organizations, We knew the United Nations and things like that. So I came back, I joined a think tank. In those days, there were no think tanks. There were hardly any, maybe one or two in the country. So I joined one of them. And I realized it was more armchair anthropology. So you're sitting there, and by then, like within 5 years, Google had really advanced, or Yahoo had come in, or something like that. So search engine had come in 5 years, from not having it to like it becoming mainstream research options. And I realized that's how people were researching, and I wasn't interested in that. Like for me, I wanted to be on the field. So sure enough, if you're focused on something, and if you really, really want something, it has a way of happening, or you have subconsciously a way of finding a way. And eventually I got associated to an organization that said, you want to go to the Northeast? We've been looking for somebody to go to the Northeast. Nobody wants to go to the Northeast. Go. So they gave me a stipend for 2 weeks, and I went to Guwahati, and I landed there, and I said, like, I'm going to take a lot more time. So I ended up staying for 3 months. After I think the first month, they stopped calling me up because they were just like, she's never coming back. So, first month they were like, when are you coming back? What's the update? Da, 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 da. After the first one, it was just like, we don't think she's coming back. We don't know where she's gone. So, and then you when you are doing research, you're not just limited to one place. You're going around other places and you meet contacts, and then you go where they tell you to. And, this was a region, and the whole region was substantially in conflict, So I started going to a lot of the conflict areas, and it was very confusing for me because we had never studied these areas. Unfortunately, we don't even have them in our syllabuses, We didn't know their culture. One of the best things about me was, and I appreciate this about myself as a younger person, is I had absolutely no lenses in terms of that I didn't look at something and say, ew, or I didn't look at something and say, wow, everything was just like, it is as it is, So if I have to sleep on the floor, I have to sleep on the floor. It didn't it was uncomfortable. I would have had it some other way, but it was what it was. Like, this is what I have to do. So if I had to eat food that was not really something I'd grown up eating, I have to eat it because I'm hungry. So that helped me go into terrains that usually people wouldn't.
So that was something that helped you out throughout the entire journey.
It still helps me out. Okay. Not having preconceived notions, not being judgmental in terms of I'm only a rice eater, or I'm only a roti eater, or oh my God, look at how they eat, or oh my God, look at how they sit, or what they wear, or, I never had those lenses. I don't know why, but you're grown up, sometimes you grow up just being that way. And I was, and that helped me in my research and my fieldwork because I got along with people got along with me, and if you don't otherize people, people don't otherize you. Right. So that helped me greatly in my fieldwork.
Okay. But ma'am, when we talk about Northeast today, right? Today, like she said, she even went to Northeast a few days ago, and the situation, she still said it wasn't all right. It was still semi-rural, right? But what was the situation 15 years ago for someone who's not been there? How would you describe?
It was tough on multiple levels because first of all, you've got to explain it to your parents before you even take that flight. Like, mom, dad, I want to go to the Northeast. What's this? As a woman, so why do you want to go to the Northeast? My parents, I think, by then had figured out that I'm fairly independent and, they had enough trust in me. So one of the things I figured that you need to do is you just need to have your head on your shoulders. So this is not something the parents tell you. It's not just something in the air, but it's reality. Like every situation, you have to look at it rationally with logic, detach from emotions. We pay too much of, we pay a lot of attention to our emotions. It complicates things because half the time emotions are also, and I mean, people can disagree with me, this is my opinion. Half the time emotions are also just fears, right? Now you take that fear impact out and you realize it's black or it's white. There isn't literally a lot of gray area. And I think my parents realized that about me, that my assessment would always be basis that, therefore I would never get too adventurous. I'd know where to stop. I'd be a good judge of people. So first hurdle, of course, was that. Second was going there, and everybody was suspicious of me. You're a kid from, England, you've studied there for so long, you're here, nobody really comes from the rest of the country here, why are you here? Insurgency was rampant, so you never knew who you were talking to or who that person was associated to. And my research was on insurgency, so, and conflict and, this kind of stuff. So one had to be careful, but very quickly I realized that this is going to take time. There was no infrastructure. There were no real taxis that you could take who would stay with you for a couple of weeks. So for somebody like me from South Delhi who hasn't even been to had ever been on public transportation, here I was taking a 17-hour local bus ride into the hotspots of insurgency called Haflong, where in that 17 hours, for 10 hours, I had a drunk man travel with me standing with his elbow on my head and taking a nap. Okay, that's how he traveled. And there was no space to move. You could literally smell people with this chock-a-block. After 17 hours, and I still remember this day really, really well, it was early in the morning when we started reaching close to Haflong, and I tried to get up and I couldn't get up because my knees were jammed, because there wasn't even that much of space in the bus. It was so chock-a-block that you could even stretch your legs out. So they were jammed. It took me like half an hour to even just stand up, and it was in extreme pain. And that pain continued for years after that. Like I needed like physio for it, So forget about, encountering insurgents, but just the terrain and the way you travel or the places that you live in. You have to be resilient enough to be able to tolerate that, So once people saw that that's how committed I was, people started opening up. I started making channels. People started trusting me. I ended up interviewing some of the most impacted people, and that's not really easy because they have to live there. You'll interview them, you'll get your stuff out of them, you'll leave. The kind of pressure groups they were under, they'd come in like, they could put I could put their lives in danger, but they trusted me enough to know that I would not use their real names, I would use the information properly. And those networks, when they saw that I kept coming back month after month, year after year, became friends.
Okay, wow. That was a lot of things. That was intense actually. Okay.
That's fieldwork.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the best ways of understanding anything is being on the field.
Why would you choose to do that? You had a pretty privileged upbringing. Yes. You grew up in Delhi. You studied in England, and then I think you could have made a very comfortable life for yourself anywhere in the world.
So I get this a lot. I still till date get this, So yeah, my choices, and there's no offense to anybody, but my choices could have been fashion design. Yeah, it could have been, let's say, I don't know, like other girls are doing things like this, like people who were from my circle. And if that's what they enjoy, fair enough. I don't judge that. it just would not keep me interested. You know, what would keep me interested is really finding out stuff that nobody's found out, going to places that nobody's been, being able to understand human interactions. See, these insurgencies cropped up from within our country, within our own communities, within our own people. You know, why did it not happen to you and me? Why did it happen to kids who were our age, but who were there? You know, what sort of impact did it have on them? You know, these were questions that bothered me. And anybody who comes from a point of view of putting your nation first in terms of, I was always very proud of my nation. You know, when I went to England, India, nobody used to talk about India. India was always considered like that poor country. The way it's globally positioned itself today, wherein that, you know that if you get stuck in any country anywhere in the world, the Indian embassy today is active enough to pull you out of it, right? We've seen the kind of evacuations that they've done in countries that have gone into conflict, including Afghanistan. This was not 15 years ago. 15 years ago in India, you could keep calling up the embassy. They would not even answer your calls, you know. And general perception of India was that it's dysfunctional, you know. So to me, it was really important to know that within India, we have these different parameters for people my age and kids who are living there. Why should it be so? Why should they be, why are they compelled to join insurgent groups, whereas I am not? And I always understood the importance of the geographical location of the Northeast. You know, it's supremely important to us. The people there have always been connected to India. If you go into ancient history, scriptures, they have, we've had the same consciousness and civilizational connect. Suddenly there's a snap wherein people feel like they are othered and they're othering us. So for me to find those answers were really important. But having said that, I think to me it's also the adventure and the excitement of it. You know, I don't think you can do any of this if you don't have a spirit of adventure, if you're going to be scared. And even when I was younger, anything that scared me was the first thing that I wanted to do. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, ma'am, living there, how long did you live there for?
I lived there for 2 years, but whenever I travel there, it would be 2 months, 3 months. Okay. And then since then, in the last maybe 10 years, I've been there twice a year. Okay. But then I don't now go for as long as I used to.
Okay. So, ma'am, like, could you tell us what your observations or some of the top 3 or 4 things that you observed there, that you learned over there? Something that you'll always carry throughout your life.
That diversity is natural to human beings, you know, and in India it even is more so, because India is, you know, our civilization is not just a nation, it's a civilization. You know, the idea of the nation came very, very late. You know, as a civilization, if you start reading what in ancient history that they've said about the Northeast, you realize that nothing was looked upon as something different. Like even tribal communities, when you see how they've written, they never spoke about them as anything different. It was just like they were living there, you know, or they were, you know, like the minute we make something sound like it's spectacular or special or unique, somewhere in our language, we are also saying that they're different. Wherein when you realize that everybody's unique, everybody's special, one is not more than the other, you start accepting the diversity as it's meant to be accepted without any exceptions. And that's what that was a great learning experience in the Northeast, that, you know, there are different cultures, there are different languages, there are different religions, there are different ways of living, different ways of eating. It shouldn't shock you, you know, it should excite you. And the other thing I realized is that India is huge. I mean, to travel from one place to another is enormous. Like 3.5 hours flight just into Guwahati, you know, go from within the same state, you know, travel by road 17 hours, 20 hours, you know. It's enormous, and we haven't seen like the tip of it. Like after that, I realized I don't want to travel internationally as much as I want to travel within India, you know. This is, and you get everything. Even in the Northeast, you'll get like the hills, you'll get the plains, you'll get the, you know, you get the cold, you'll get the summers. So, you know, I learned a couple of things like this. And of course, the other thing I learned was being resilient and being persistent pays you great dividends. Okay. The fact that I'm still sitting here after 15 years and talking about the same stuff I did 15 years ago says a lot.
Definitely. So, ma'am, after you came out of that 2 years, very intense experience, a lot of many serious things that happened, a lot of things that you learned along the way. How did you, from there, what happened next? How did you come back to, let's say, a lot more normalcy, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I moved back to Delhi. I missed my parents. I wanted to be somewhere close and all of that. Also, Delhi was the power center in terms of a lot of the policy decisions happened here. So my research and my fieldwork should have some outcome to it, which would actually mean advisory or policy initiatives. And so therefore Delhi as a city was important for me. It's also the fact that I'm born in Delhi and I love Delhi. People may love to hate it, but if you're born in Delhi, there's things about it that are just really intrinsically like So I quite like Delhi. And work was there, and lots of people asked me the questions that Sarah did, that you could have gone anywhere. Why did you go to the Northeast? So I get that all the time till date. Also, if you do field work in areas like this, and if you do research generally, it's better not to be really out there. It's better to do it quietly. It's better to do it at the background. So I still find it really difficult in Delhi to answer questions socially, because people say, so what do you do? That's the first question they ask. I was like, oh God, do you really want to know this? Because if I tell you, you're not going to believe it, Yeah. So sometimes I say I write. Sometimes I say I don't do anything. Sometimes I say, research. And they're like, what research? Like journalist. I was like, no, I'm not a journalist. So yeah, coming back was answering a hell of a lot of questions.
And then you joined a think tank again.
Yeah. The same one that I was associated with. Yeah. It means I was with them full time. Then I went there. I set up another think tank in Guwahati when I was there for 2 years. I was founding director of a think tank. Then I came back. Then I joined the initial think tank, but not on a permanent basis. So, now I go in thrice a week.
Okay, all right. So, ma'am, since then, after coming through all those experiences, what sort of impact were you able to cause for Northeast per se?
Oh, nothing. Nothing at all.
Not nothing.
I mean, I wouldn't like to assess what impact I was able to make, because I don't think that's for me to assess. That's for the people who know my work. It's for them to assess. I think what I will say is that I saw great change in the Northeast. Northeast today has come back into mainstream consciousness. We're all talking about it. We're talking about the Hornbill Festival. People want to go there. People want to go to Tawang. Unfortunately, right now we're talking about the Manipur conflict as well. But having said that, one of the things that I thought was really important to do was be able to collaborate with intelligentsia on ground, because of course, there were only a few of us who were studying the Northeast and we would talk about the Northeast, but to be able to collaborate with the kind of great minds that you have there, and also be able to bring them into light here, and for us to be brought into light there as people of different spaces, normalizing commentary on each other. When I went, it was not normal. So people would say, oh, what would you know about us? You've come from outside. What do you know about the Northeast? And the same people would say here, oh, what do you know about Delhi? You've come from there, That has to be normalized if you live in the same country. My commentary on them and their commentary on me should be normal. And I think that, if not in a large way, in a small way, I am so touched as how accepted I am. I just had a talk in Jawaharlal Nehru University. 300 people from the Northeast turned up.
Oh, okay.
I had old ladies, and this is on a Sunday, who came from 2 to 3 hours away to just come and hear me talk. For me, I take this, it's a very humbling experience. It really humbles me, because I've got the abuse. As a young researcher going there and people saying, no, you can't talk because you're not from here. But to come to this point is, I think, the greatest change that I've seen.
So, coming back to this, after you've made a lot of impactful things, and like I said, you also, last year as well, you came to our institute and you had a wonderful talk, and we loved listening to that. All of us were present there at the talk. So, ma'am, how was that experience like coming to NMIMS then? I mean, that is a very small part of your journey.
Yeah, but it was amazing. I loved coming here. I was really like, I'm always taken aback by how much more confident kids are than I was at that age. When I was of that age, we never had public speaking experience. We never had organizing experience because those were not the things that people focused on because we didn't have social media. We didn't have, we didn't have the web to put stuff on in. We didn't have platforms. So if anything happened, it used to be college debates. Right. That was the limiter of it, and it wasn't recorded really. It wasn't good. So you weren't careful. Which is one of the things I feel sad about kids now is that you have to be careful about anything you do or say because if it's cancel culture, woke culture, also the fact that you may be under pressure or maybe saying something or doing something and that could go viral. We never had that pressure. Like me and my friends joke that thank God we did everything that we had to before Facebook came up, so there isn't anything floating around, But so that's the difference that I noticed. But TEDx was so incredibly organized and the relationship that you had with your teachers was very impressive, We had a relationship with our teachers, but it was more of a teacher and a student. There was a sense of that difference. And I'm glad that was there because we weren't as mature as all of you were, so we couldn't have pulled off a lot of things that you do. So yeah, to me it was really a lot of fun.
Now, ma'am, considering the time constraint, I have one last thing that I would like to ask you. What are your future plans for let's say the next 1 year or so? What do you want to do?
Next one, yeah.
Like to focus on?
Well, I'd like to finish my book.
Okay.
Right. So I've done 2 edited volumes and I write a whole lot in terms of for magazines, articles and things like that. But this is my magnum opus. I never wrote on the Northeast in a very condensed way because I always think you need to master the subject before you do so. Anybody can do anything and write books these days. It's really easy. But if that's all you want to do, then go for it. But if you really want to challenge a framework and you really want to be best at what you do, you want to be the final word and you want to be an expert, then there's no compensation for the time that you spend. That's also giving respect to the region that you're studying, and it's also giving respect to your own intelligence because nobody can study anything. I'll tell you to finish your MBA in 15 days flat, you're not going to be able to do it, So it's the same with this. So I think finish my book. I keep doing it and redoing it and I need to stop and just get it out. I need to possibly push my fieldwork a little bit more, go back on the field, but this time maybe go beyond borders, because I haven't done really, I keep going back to the same place, but I haven't really done what I did and have had the same feeling that I did the first time round, for a very long time. So I want to do that again. And what else? I want to be able to run a marathon.
Okay.
Yeah, just on another note, I'd like to be fit enough to run another marathon. So yeah, stuff like that.
Well, ma'am, it was amazing talking to you, and it was an incredible experience, especially in such a crisp format. You were able to bring out your whole entire life to us. It was wonderful. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us, taking out your very precious time. And yeah, hopefully you can come, or we could come to Delhi, we could come visit your office.
No problem. You can come anytime you want, except now with the amount of time you've taken, I'm not going to make it to my flight, so we could just continue for another 4 hours. No, but thank you for having me. It was fun and so grateful that you didn't ask me any of the questions you were threatening to ask me.
I wanted to. I really wanted to.
Yeah, but you have to see me in office tomorrow. So yeah, so thanks for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a good day. And thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.